as he insults his father, the king, as he fails to achieve a sellout crowd for his boring speech about mental health, which was very bad for the mental health of those listening. And according to one of Australia's leading journalists, Harry was completely ignored.
The verdict on the Sussex tour in Australia didn't come from protests. It came from silence. And that hit harder than anything. Alexandra Marshall from The Spectator Australia put it straight. Most Australians didn't even know Harry and Meghan were there. People nearby just carried on like normal. On a Sydney beach, a woman kept sunbathing as Harry walked past. Not to make a point, she simply didn't notice. That's a serious problem when your whole image depends on attention. You can't be called the most trolled person in the world and also be ignored.
Harry's fake royal tour in Australia has been a catastrophe. It is a new low for the prince, as fresh cracks appear in his marriage. More on that shortly. Shocking stuff.
You can't run a royal-style tour and have barely anyone aware. Meghan claimed she's a major global target of online hate, saying it confidently to students. But at the same time, Marshall said she had to look up what the couple were doing while they were close by. Those two realities don't match. Australia was meant to prove their global impact, but it showed the opposite. Even in polls, Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Diana, both gone, rank above every living royal. And Harry sits near the bottom. That contrast speaks loud.
To Australia and barely anybody notices, I wouldn't say that's positive. I am an ambassador for Australians for constitutional monarchy, so I do have a general love of the monarchy here.
Yeah.
And when Princess Anne came, there was far more love and affection for Princess Anne than this current royal tour.
Meghan landed at the very bottom. The couple came to Australia hoping to prove they still matter and boost their brand. But instead, they walked into a public that had already made up its mind. No big campaign against them. People just didn't care. In a country that still has real warmth for the royal family, they came off as the least interesting figures. The contrast couldn't be clearer. When King Charles visited, the streets were packed, the energy was real, and the support felt natural. That kind of reaction can't be staged. Charles showed up as the monarch and people responded with genuine connection. Harry showed up as a former prince tied to a wellness brand and speaking gigs, and the crowds just didn't show. Even Princess Anne pulled more respect and attention. She avoids the spotlight, skips interviews about personal struggles, and doesn't turn appearances into sales moments.
Richard Fitzwilliams told me on my Talk TV show, this was a dress rehearsal for Harry and Meghan coming to the United Kingdom. Good luck with that, because Charles would have seen the headlines and the embarrassing behavior and the money-obsessed activities. William will have seen the behavior, the bad headlines, the money-obsessed activities, and neither will want anything to do with this.
Yet she still connects better with the public. That says a lot when compared to a couple who built their whole trip around visibility and promotion. Then came the moment that had people talking. At Meghan's Her Best Life event, Harry didn't stick around. Guests said he sat off to the side, then suddenly rushed out before she even finished speaking. No waiting, no support at the end. Just gone. One attendee said, "It was really odd." Harry sort of rushed out really quickly. And honestly, that behavior stood out. At a major event like that, you expect a partner to stay, show support, and be present. Walking out early? That raised more eyebrows than applause. Harry didn't have anywhere else to be in Australia at that moment. His own event was already done. No tight schedule, no urgent reason to leave, yet he still walked out. That kind of exit sends a message. It points to something. His mindset, his view of the event, or even his dynamic with Meghan.
Are an upgrade on the job his father, Charles, did. Now, let's not forget that this is a man in his late 70s who's battling cancer, and he's the king of the United Kingdom. You could afford him a little bit of respect. He's the king. Clues in the title, you kind of respect the king. He's an older man, and he's got a serious disease. He's actually not that well.
And all signs seem to circle back to the same question people keep asking. What's really going on in the marriage? Speculation has been building for months. Photos where the affection looks staged, not natural. Moments like the premiere where Meghan leaned toward Ted Sarandos instead of Harry. Then this sudden exit from her event. Even Alexandra Marshall hinted at a split in priorities, saying one of them seems more interested in returning to Britain, and later suggesting Meghan isn't keen on that move. That's where things start to clash. Harry's actions point toward the UK, his security efforts, attempts to rebuild his image, even pushing for invitations to royal spaces. Meghan's focus looks locked on California, business deals, and Hollywood circles. Those paths don't easily line up for a couple trying to stay united, and this tour, meant to show they're aligned, ended up revealing cracks instead. One unguarded moment, Harry leaving early, spoke louder than any speech.
Dooming the ghost of poor old Diana. How dare he? And how do you think it makes William feel when Harry is using Diana for clicks, to boost his image, to boost his reputation, and ultimately for dollars? How do you think it makes William feel?
It made the unity feel less real, more like something carefully put on display. Harry has played many roles over the years: the soldier, the prince, the public figure, and for a long time, he's also played the devoted husband. But moments like this make people question how real that role still is. Harry isn't known as a great actor, and that moment at the retreat made it obvious. The role slipped, and something real showed through. He couldn't sit there and watch the rest of Meghan's speech, so he got up and left. And in doing that, he revealed more than words ever could. His speech at the Inter-Edge Summit added even more layers. He talked about feeling lost, betrayed, and completely powerless at different points in his life. He admitted he buried his emotions for years. He spoke about people feeling anxious, stressed, and overwhelmed in today's world. He even praised Australia's social media rules, calling them epic, while sharing thoughts on mental health support and saying he's not a city person. Then came the line that really grabbed attention. He said, in a very casual tone, that being a working royal killed my mom. That statement didn't go unnoticed. Princess Diana died in Paris in 1997 after a car crash involving a driver over the legal alcohol limit. She wasn't under official royal protection at the time and had made independent choices about her security after her separation.
These two are in the country. Even if they're in the same city, they probably don't even know they're in the same street. That is a total failure of the Sussex brand.
Ken Wharf, her former protection officer, has publicly said that if she had kept royal security, she likely would have survived. So that claim hits differently when you look at the facts. Investigations in both the UK and France examined the case in detail, and the conclusions don't support that version. And the way Harry said it, quick, almost offhand, stood out. When people speak about deep loss, especially after many years, it usually carries more weight than a passing remark. When people talk about real loss, their words usually carry weight. There's depth, reflection, and care in how they say things. But Harry's way of speaking about his mother has often sounded surprisingly casual. That raises questions. Has it become a repeated line that lost its impact, or is there real distance behind it? Either way, it doesn't match the emotional depth his message about grief and healing is meant to show. And it's not just about Diana. When speaking about his father's illness, he said, "I don't know how long he's got." Again, the tone felt unusually light for something so serious. That pattern stands out. Most people dealing with situations like that don't speak in such a relaxed way. The tone itself becomes part of the story. Alexandra Marshall's take on the tour adds another angle, and she was right there in Sydney. She said the couple was practically nearby, yet she still had to search online to figure out what they were doing. Even more striking, media coverage in the UK and US was stronger than in Australia itself. The tour seemed aimed more at overseas audiences than the people actually there. For Australians, who were supposed to be at the center of it all, it barely made a ripple. This is the core issue the tour couldn't fix. A PR push built for foreign headlines, grabbing attention in the UK and US, doesn't actually serve the local people it claims to help. It looked global, but it didn't land where it mattered. The humanitarian angle needed real support from Australians. The business side needed local interest and turnout, but neither showed up in the numbers they were counting on. And that quiet indifference said more than any protest ever could. Then there's Harry's reported pull toward Britain, which adds a more personal edge to the whole situation. This tour was supposed to prove he's still relevant, still admired, still able to draw crowds and connection without the royal structure behind him. But that proof never came. Events didn't sell out. Crowds were thin or missing. People nearby didn't even know they were there. Even that beach moment stuck. No reaction, no recognition. And that early exit from Meghan's event, it added to the picture. It felt like someone searching for validation and not finding it, trying to recreate status without accepting the cost that usually comes with it. Because the reality seems clear. The visibility, the influence, the public connection, it's tied to the role he stepped away from. And this tour showed, in a very direct way, that you can't separate the two and expect the same result. Now, attention shifts to what comes next. A possible return to Britain, future appearances like Invictus, and ongoing decisions about security could shape the next chapter. The family angle still matters here. If King Charles is open to contact and Prince William stays distant, that shapes the emotional backdrop of everything. And this Australian tour, barely noticed locally, mostly covered overseas, struggling commercially, and ending with Harry walking out early, just adds more evidence to how people are judging the situation. The simplest way to sum it up, nobody showed up. They were expecting crowds and got empty spaces instead. That says a lot about where the Sussex brand stands right now. And with summer coming, whatever they do next will be compared to this moment. A tour that crossed the world and barely made an impact where it actually happened. Looking at the numbers makes it even clearer. Big keynote speakers fill rooms, but Harry's summit appearance needed heavy discounts and still didn't reach capacity. A strong lifestyle brand moves products, but the rollout showed little real traction. A high-profile retreat usually sells out fast and keeps people talking. But this one didn't sell out and stayed tightly controlled with barely any organic buzz. And a royal-style tour? That should bring crowds and local media attention. But here, coverage in Australia was minimal, and public reactions stayed flat. Any one of these issues alone wouldn't mean much. Projects fail all the time. But when every single measure falls short at once, on a tour designed to prove success, that combined picture becomes hard to ignore. This says something very direct about the brand. There's a clear gap between the value being claimed and what people are actually willing to pay for. And that short retreat appearance, just over an hour, wasn't some random timing issue. It showed the real level of pull behind it. There was enough interest to bring in a paying audience, but not enough to hold the room the way a strong brand would. That difference matters. Then comes the sharpest comparison. Princess Anne. As Alexandra Marshall pointed out, Anne generates more genuine warmth in Australia. And it's not despite her low profile, it's because of it. She doesn't chase attention, doesn't mix charity with commercial angles, doesn't turn personal stories into headlines, and doesn't sell an image online. She shows up, does the job, and leaves. That's it. And over time, that consistency builds real trust. That kind of public respect can't be bought or staged. It comes from years of steady, visible service without a sales angle attached. That's the model the institution was built to protect. And that's where the gap shows. Harry and Meghan can't recreate that same response because the approach is completely different. Commercial deals, tightly controlled events, curated moments, it all feels managed. People notice that difference. They can tell when something feels real versus when it feels constructed. And that's exactly what the reaction in Australia reflected on a national scale. Even ongoing talk about their relationship picked up again after that retreat moment, with Harry sitting off to the side and then leaving early. That single scene added even more questions to an already growing conversation. That really odd moment couldn't be smoothed over. Around 150 people saw it happen live, and it was reported by the Times. This wasn't a staged photo or controlled clip. It was real, witnessed, and described by people in the room. And that makes it harder to ignore. Most of the tour was filtered through approved images and managed coverage. But this slipped through. It happened, and it stuck. Then there's the body language throughout the tour, the constant hand-holding, the repeated physical closeness. It didn't come off as natural to many observers. It looked more like effort than ease, and that difference stands out. Strong relationships don't usually need that level of visible display all the time. When it feels overdone, people start wondering what's underneath it. Alexandra Marshall also pointed to something bigger. She suggested one of them seems more interested in returning to Britain and hinted that Meghan may not share that interest. That kind of split says a lot about direction because their paths look very different. Meghan's world is centered in California, business, branding, and connections that all tie into that space. That's where her opportunities are. Harry's pull seems elsewhere. Britain offers him the structure, the role, and the sense of purpose he's shown he still values. Moments like visiting a war memorial in Canberra wearing his medals or speaking about his mother reflect that connection. And when those two directions don't line up, it creates tension that's hard to hide. Harry's push for security isn't just about safety. That's the key point. It's tied to status, recognition, and being acknowledged by the institution he stepped away from. That's why he's taken it through legal channels and even pushed for invites to royal spaces like Sandringham. When you line it up, a pattern shows. His actions point toward wanting that connection back, even if his words say otherwise. And this tour? It looked like part of that effort, trying to prove he and Meghan still carry weight, still matter, and are worth accommodating. But the plan didn't land. The institution stayed distant. King Charles kept moving forward, Prince William held his position, and the strongest reaction came from moments like Alexandra Marshall saying she had to search online to see what they were doing, while they were nearby. The simplest takeaway stayed the same. People didn't show up, events lacked energy, crowds were missing, and that early exit only added to the overall picture. Looking ahead, a return to Britain raises the stakes. The media will be sharper, the scrutiny heavier, and the personal dynamics more intense. But the approach may not change. Same structure, same style, same controlled presentation. And that's where the big question sits. Will the response shift or stay just as cool? Because one thing already looks clear. The Australia tour stacked up a long list of signals: low poll rankings, limited turnout, muted attention, and together, they paint a picture of a brand struggling to hold the level of impact it once claimed. For things to turn around, something has to shift, whether it's the relationship, the business model, the institutional ties, or all three. Otherwise, the direction stays the same. And whatever happens next will be compared to Australia. And that quiet moment on the beach that said everything without a word. The timing made it even sharper. While this tour was happening, King Charles was in Washington handling real diplomatic work. High stakes, global pressure, and doing it while dealing with serious health challenges. That's the role in action, serving a national purpose under tight limits. At the same time, Harry was in Australia running a version that looked similar on the surface, but played out very differently. Controlled settings, managed coverage, and a focus that leaned commercial while local attention stayed low. That contrast stands out. Father and son, same background, completely different paths at the exact same moment. One side reflects the traditional role, structured, official, tied to public duty. The other moves through media, branding, and curated appearances. And that gap? It's exactly the kind of divide that was once warned about, and now it's fully visible. Both stories ran side by side, both drew headlines, but they told very different things. And in the end, the takeaway from Australia stayed simple and sharp. Not outrage, not backlash, just indifference. And that kind of reaction can hit harder than anything else. Indifference sends a clear message. You've been seen, judged, and set aside. And that's exactly what played out in Australia. Over 4 days of carefully managed appearances, Harry and Meghan were measured against real public interest. And it just wasn't there. Australia didn't react with anger or pushback. It simply didn't engage. In a country that still shows real warmth toward the monarchy it chose to keep, that silence stood out. The crowds that came out for King Charles, the respect Princess Anne received, the lasting affection for Diana and the Queen, none of it carried over. The idea that you can hold on to the spotlight without the responsibilities behind it was tested, and it didn't land. The result was direct and hard to miss. Across cities, events, and appearances, hospital visits, a war memorial, a retreat that lasted just over an hour, a beach stop, a summit, and tightly managed media, everything was in place, except the public response. And the final takeaway stayed simple. Nobody showed up. They expected crowds, but the energy wasn't there. Events felt empty, moments passed quietly, and even departures came early. If you made it this far, drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe for more breakdowns like this.